Court is back in session.
To the jury. All rise for the jury.
Everybody be seated, please. You may proceed, Mr. Sangaday.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Sam Zhang and I represent Mr. Garcia. I'm going to ask you some questions with regards to your investigation and your testimony, okay?
I understand.
So the government asked you to do your due diligence and kind of find out if my client, Mr. Garcia, had made any purchases with regards to automobiles or motorcycles, correct?
Yes.
And the information that you gave the jury on direct examination was from a time period from July of 2014 till a few months after that, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, one of the vehicles that you talked about, and this is Government's Exhibit 102, was a Monte Carlo, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what year that Monte Carlo was?
Yes, it's a 1984.
And do you remember the mileage on the Monte Carlo?
I don't have it listed.
Will you agree with me that a car with more mileage would be an impact on the value of the vehicle?
Yes.
Was there any information with regards to the purchase price of that vehicle within the documentation that you provided?
I don't recall any.
Direct your attention to Government's Exhibit, 103. Would it be fair to say I'm not as savvy as you'll agree with me that it's a 1984 Chevrolet two-door, color in blue, correct?
Correct.
And the purchase date of this vehicle was what date? Do you recall?
July 26, 2014.
And does this document show that the vehicle was sold a year later for $600?
Objection, relevant?
A rule. Just publishing
it's
a
in
document that's in evidence, as I
can't-
understand.
I can't see that well enough to see.
Oh, sure, no problem. Let me zoom in. You see what's circled there that says selling price?
I see it.
What number is that? Can you tell the jury?
$600.
Let's go back a few smidges here. And this is the title that my client purchased 1980. I'm sorry. There we go. There we go. So this is the certificate of title for Secreto Garcia, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the same 1984 two-door Chevrolet, correct?
Yes.
Which a year later was sold for $600, correct?
Correct.
Now, this is the person, is this the person that bought the vehicle from Mr. Garcia?
I can't see it well enough.
We can't read it from here, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Sangaday.
Judge. I can barely read it from where I'm at. That's the July 24th, 2015 date right there, ma'am?
Yes, I see it.
And it confirms again right here that the purchase price was $600, correct?
That is correct.
Now, any of these documents that the government listed, do you see a purchase price for Mr. Garcia buying that vehicle a year before sold it for $600?
I do not.
You'll agree with me that you had the person that he purchased it from, correct?
Yes,
Did you make any efforts to contact this person to see what the sale of the vehicle was?
I did not.
You'll agree with me that your testimony here is to inform the jury of purchases that my client made post-murder, correct?
Yes,
And you'll agree with me that it would be important and imperative to be able to educate the members of this jury as to how much this 1984 Monte Carlo actually cost, correct?
yes,
You'll agree with me that there is documentation which shows a year later that was sold for $600, correct?
Objection to ask and answer.
Sustained.
Now, we also had discussions with regards to a motorcycle, correct?
that is correct.
And this is Government's Exhibit 102, correct, ma'am?
Yes,
Okay. And that is a 1997 Honda motorcycle, correct?
yes,
And go ahead. Bring it up here. You sent a subpoena to get the records from the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles with regards to this purchase?
law enforcement did it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, did you use it in your evaluation to assist your testimony to the jury?
Yes,
All right. Now, you'll agree with me, we're going to go ahead and zoom in here. That says Secreto Garcia, is that correct, ma'am?
yes,
Okay, and you'll agree that the date there is the date that you testified on direct examination, August 12th, 2014, correct?
August 22nd.
I'm sorry. August 22nd, 2014. Roughly in the same time period that you testified in direct examination, correct?
Yes,
Let's go down here and go ahead and zoom this in. Indicate purchase price. Says $500, yeah? Yes, ma'am?
yes,
Not an extravagant purchase, correct?
I wouldn't think so.
And last but not least, a 2000 gold Nissan. You recall that?
Yes,
Okay, and that is Government's Exhibit 101, correct?
I believe so.
Now, the date, this time I'll read it correctly, December 17th, 2014, correct? It says 12/17/2014?
Yes,
Says my client's name, Secreto Garcia.
it does.
The seller here, the seller information is a website, correct?
I believe so, yes.
NiceCarsForLess.com, correct?
Yes,
All right. Did you do any due diligence to subpoena or interview anyone from NiceCarsForLess.com to see what the purchase price of that 2000 Nissan was?
I did not.
You don't know if it was $1,000 or $100, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. You testified on direct examination that you were unable to locate bank records for Mr. Garcia, is that correct?
For the 2014-2015 year.
What about before that? Did you look before that?
I don't believe those records were subpoenaed.
And by saying that, that means that you were not asked or instructed by the prosecutors to go further back to be able to obtain financial records for Mr. Garcia, is that correct?
I reviewed what law enforcement had provided me.
Okay. So the answer is yes, right? You only did, well, let me ask it this way. You only did what you were asked to do, correct?
I only review the information that's given to me.
At any point during your evaluation, do you ask, listen, I want to go back and look at previous years to see if I can do like a more wide global analyzation of the finances?
If it's necessary.
Did you find it necessary in this case
I did not.
with regard to Mr. Garcia?
I did not.
You did indicate that Mr. Garcia received, I believe, 2 paychecks from Coastal Masonry in 2014,
I did.
and you found that out how?
The records for the coastal masonry were subpoenaed.
You indicated that Mr. Garcia had steady employment in 2016, correct?
Yes, it was fairly steady, yes.
And by fairly steady, you mean he got a paycheck every week or 2 weeks from the same employer?
Yes.
You'll also agree with me that you prepared a chart with regards to Ms. McBanawa that in 2016, one of the highest contributors to her bank account was my client, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that he has 2 children with Ms. McBanawa?
I am aware of that.
And you're aware that they were living together at that time, correct?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay. Did it appear that the majority of my client's check would be transferred to Ms. McBanawa's account?
I couldn't say a majority, but
A healthy portion?
a healthy portion, yes.
It appears from your testimony, it looks like the government's position is that Ms. McBanawa was paid like an annuity for her involvement in a crime, correct?
I don't know if I could characterize it by that. But
Well, it wasn't one lump sum, correct?
I do not know how the payment was made.
You'll agree that your analyzation of the payments given by the Adelson Institute and by Charlie Adelson spanned a long period of time, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you see any such payments like that from Mr. Garcia?
I did not.
Did you see any kind of specific cash withdrawal? Now, you indicated earlier, let me strike that initial question. You indicated earlier that your characterization of the Adelsons was wealthy, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. They had money market accounts, multiple investments, correct?
Yes.
Bank accounts,
Yes.
substantial holdings in their accounts.
Yes.
In June or July of 2014, did you see what would sum to be a $100,000 withdrawal from any of their financial markets?
I did not.
In 2016, were you able to see any substantial cash withdrawal from the Adelsons' account?
In 2016?
2016.
For what amounts?
Anything over $30,000?
There were withdrawals.
Okay. Cash withdrawals?
No, they were for payments for income taxes.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't ask the question correctly.
Okay.
Let me ask it another way.
All right.
Did you see any substantial cash withdrawals from the Adelsons, whether it's Wendy, Donna, Harvey, or Charlie, cash withdrawals in 2016, substantial ones?
No.
Give me just 1 second.
No.
Thank you for your time. No further questions.
McBanawa?
Thank you. Ms. Hall, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You would agree with me that to make your financial analysis in any case, you need to have all the data, right?
I can do an analysis on the data that I have.
You need more than just bits and pieces, right?
Yes.
You need to have the full picture, right?
I do my best to get the full picture, yes.
Now, you currently work at the Attorney General's office. You've been there for a couple of years, right?
Yes.
Before that, the Department of Financial Services.
Yes.
Work for the state of Florida, right?
Yes.
So for about a decade, you've been working as an expert witness for the Leon County State Attorney's Office, correct?
No, that's not really accurate.
You've been called as an expert witness by them over the past 7 years?
I have been called before, yes.
Never by the defense?
No, never by the
All right. But that doesn't inhibit you here today with me looking at Miss Meg Banwa's finances through clean windows, right?
That's correct.
Do you know what I mean by looking at her through clean windows?
Well, I can only surmise that you wanted me to be fair and balanced,
Objective.
objective.
All right. Let's go first to the Adelson Institute.
Okay.
You received some documents in your analysis, right?
Yes,
Now, let me ask you on that. When you're doing your analysis, it's based on what's given to you by the prosecutors, right?
yes,
Now, you may make requests and say, look, I need more, but you're heavily depending that they're giving you all the information, right?
yes,
Now, in preparation for the testimony today and in preparation for all the work that you did on the case, and not saying that it's wrong to do, you met with these prosecutors multiple times, communicated with them, right?
yes,
So at some point you get documentation, it's entered in as States 87, from the Adelson Institute. You remember that?
I do.
Now, you were asked some questions about Ms. Norris, whether there were other documents that were provided to you. Do you remember those questions?
Yes,
And you said no, that they weren't in the packet that you received,
correct.
and presumably not given by the Adelson Institute, right?
Yes,
By law, none of those documents are required, though, right?
required under the subpoena?
No. So there's no requirement in the state of Florida for a business to describe as part of their employee file what somebody does for the business, right?
Correct,
It's not required by law that there's a job application, right?
I suppose, right?
You suppose. What do you mean you suppose? I don't know if there's a gradient on that.
Oh, there is no law requiring an application.
But there was a response to the subpoena with documents, right?
Yes,
And these are documents that you could then corroborate through taxes that have been paid by the business over the time periods of the checks, right?
yes,
Now, I'm going to turn you over to States 109. Now, Ms. Norris asked you questions specifically about the items in red. That are exhibits to make it easier.
okay.
So let's take those 3 lines right there. Now, what did the red mean again?
That they were sequentially numbered checks.
Do you know the work schedule of Donna Adelson?
I do not.
When she takes vacations?
No,
What days she comes in during the week?
no, I do not.
What about other employees? Were you asked to do an analysis on how checks were written for Clariza Libredo,
No,
Erica Johnson?
no,
Whether, Miss Adelson came in 1 day a week, wrote checks, was gone the next week? You don't know that, do you?
I do not.
To come to a conclusion on that, you'd need to have all the information, right?
A conclusion on the sequential checks?
That there's something nefarious going on with sequential checks.
Oh. I don't think there's anything nefarious about that.
Because the asterisk, that means that the check was written before the end of the period. Is that what that means?
Yes,
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this first column is when Ms. Magbanwa deposits her checks, right?
yes,
Ms. Magbanwa is not depositing the checks before the time frame for when she's working, right? Let's take, for instance, line 11. Checks written on 2/5.
We
Right.
can't read that because
Let me know when it's good. Is that
I
better
can-
now?
yes,
All right, so let's take lines 11, 12, and 13. Start with line 11. The memo line is January 26th to February 4th. Now, that's written on the check is the memo line, right?
yes,
And presumably the work period.
yes,
Now, those checks are all written, or that one's written on February 4th, right?
correct.
When does Ms. Magbanwa deposit it?
On February 12th,
Now, let's go a line down. The pay period is February 9th to the 19th. When does she deposit it?
February 26th,
And then the next one, February 23rd to March 5th, when's she depositing?
March 11th.
So isn't this in line with somebody working and then receiving a check and depositing it?
It would represent that, yes.
And doesn't this whole document actually represent that?
Yes.
Well over 90% of the time, except for, and the jurors will be able to look at it later on, all of her deposit dates come after what's in the memo line.
Yes.
Do you know how Ms. Magbanwa was receiving her checks?
I do not.
Whether they were mailed,
I do not.
whether they were hand-delivered by one of the employees?
I do not.
Now, along those lines, do you even know what she was doing for work?
I do not.
You were asked questions about how she was paid around the time of breast surgery. You remember that?
Yes.
And the dates that help you out here. Oh, I can find the sticker. Your Honor, if I could have one moment?
Good night.
Maybe missing the exhibit sticker. Okay. All right. Now, what you were talking about was that she has breast surgery and how she's still receiving checks around that time period, right?
Yes.
Do you know whether breast surgery would inhibit her from doing the job that she was doing for the Adelson Institute?
I do not.
Because again, you don't know what her work was,
That's correct.
or whether she would have actually missed work.
That's correct.
For instance, if her job was to log onto the computer, contact patients, that could be something that could be done from bed.
I believe home.
Going back now to Government 109, and this is in reference to some text messages. You were asked by the government, here it is, Government 63, how there was text messages by Charles Adelson talking about Catherine McBanwa's information and how that was in advance of when she was employed.
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. So this text message is September 16, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Her first day of work is September 15, 2018. The first check is written on September 17, 2014. And she isn't paid, or she doesn't deposit a check until October 18, 2014.
Correct.
So it's all around the same time frame.
It is around the same time frame.
Is this anything different than the normal practice of hiring an employee? You get their information, they start working?
Normally, you would have all that information before you started working.
Depends on the business though, right?
Normally, you have all the information of your employees before you start working there.
And your basis of knowledge on that is based on all companies in the state of Florida?
You asked the question, Mr. McCall, we're not gonna then argue with her about her answer. Move on, please.
Not a problem. Let's go now to Government's 118. You created this chart, right?
That's correct.
Now, the big thing here is the comparison between 2013 and 14. It goes from 2,800 to 46,820. It's a big jump, right?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have any records from January to June of 2013.
That's correct.
Isn't that then giving inaccurate information by saying that for 2013, her total cash deposits are 2,800?
It's accurate based on what I have for records, and I do denote that I do not have any records from January to July.
And you denote it by putting a dash.
Yes.
But the government didn't ask you what that dash means.
It means it's zero.
We know that now, right?
I knew it then.
No. We in this courtroom, we know that now because I just asked you, right?
If you look at the summary that comes from, it shows that I have partial records.
My question is, you weren't asked that until I asked you, though, right?
You're correct.
Now, 2016, same thing. You don't have records from August till December, right?
That is correct.
Because Ms. McBann was in custody.
That's most likely correct.
One second, Your Honor. Now, we started out, we were talking about needing to have the full information and not bits and pieces, right? Let's come over to your graph here. Did the government give you information, evidence for your analysis that Ms. Magbanwa, starting in late 2013 and continuing for years, was working, receiving cash tips?
Objection, facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
I based that on the bank records, and I do not have anything that would show she worked and made cash tips.
Because it wasn't given to you, right?
Objection,
Your legal objection.
argumentative, lack of foundation.
Overruled.
I was not given information, I was given the bank records.
Had you been given information, evidence that she was working a cash job starting in late 2013 and going years into the future, would that have changed the analysis?
That's a compound question. You ask her evidence or information. That's a compound question.
All right, we'll cycle back to it. Were you aware, in your review, that she was working at a nightclub?
I was not.
You received her bank records, right?
Yes.
Bank of America, right?
Yes. Mhm.
You went through all of those records.
I did.
Specifically, you went through her checking account, 8980-0426-6984.
Yes.
My apologies, Your Honor, 1 second. Ms. Hull, you know what that is, right?
Yes.
Exhibit number on this.
Showing you it's been pre-marked as Defense 14.
Yes.
That's a printout of one of the pages of bank records for Ms. Magbanwa's Bank of America account.
Yes.
And you recognize that because you've gone through all of her bank records.
That's correct.
And that's a fair and accurate depiction of her bank records, or of that page.
Yes.
Move in what's been pre-marked as Defense 14.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
I assume this is a portion of a state exhibit.
Correct, Your Honor.
You know what state exhibit is a portion of? Ms. Norris?
I believe it's,
Right, if you don't know,
no, I
somebody else.
don't offhand.
Right, just wanted the jury to kind of understand, we're taking pieces of a whole that has been placed in evidence. So I admit Defense Exhibit 14.
Ms. Hull, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a check from Faith for cash tips for April, the month of April in 2015.
Yes, that's the way the check was written.
That's not in any of the analysis that you've done, though, right?
It is. It's just that that check bounced and so did the other one. So the net amount for that was 0. I did not show it on my analysis.
But you would agree with me that this is evidence that she's working at a nightclub in April up until May of 2015.
Yes.
Now, I want to go back quickly to the government's demonstrative. You created this?
I did.
Now, you have in here that Adelson Institute, October 7th. Why October 7th?
That was the day it hit her account.
You're talking about the first check that was deposited?
Yes.
Now, when we come back to all these cash deposits, you can't say where any of this cash came from, right?
That's correct.
Whether it came from work, receiving tips at a nightclub, right?
Seems like an awful lot for tips.
Have you ever worked as a bottle girl in a nightclub in Miami?
No, I have not.
Would you then be unable to make that opinion as to how much one would make?
Done a lot of bookkeeping for different
All right,
institutions.
so then if you could tell this jury, what's the standard amount that one would make working as a VIP bottle girl in Miami at Club Fate? If you know.
I do not.
Now, you have no way to determine whether it came from an Adelson, from Club Fate, from Sigfredo Garcia, do you?
I do not.
I want to turn over now to Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. You were given bank records for them?
The records that were available, yes.
No sizable deposits into their accounts?
I'm not sure what you mean by sizable.
Your belief is that this is money for a murder deposited into an account with her name on it. Did you see the same type of activity on Luis Rivera's account?
No.
Now, turn your attention over to Governance 117. You talked about the pattern of deposits made by Ms. Magbanwa, right? And you're talking about how on a given day, and you tell me which one you want to use, 6-9, how there was multiple deposits made at multiple banks, right?
Yes.
Now, in fact, those are deposits made at different banks on the same day, right?
I would believe so. I'd have to look at, there's another chart done that represented what bank was used.
Well, doesn't this show the account number?
Yes.
The bank? All right, so if we look at 623 right here, you got Bank of America and then Chase, right?
Yes.
Now that's one of the things that caught your attention, right?
I noticed it.
All right. Do you happen to know the maximum amount of deposits Ms. Magbanwa could make at her respective accounts, whether it was 300, 500, 800? Do you know that?
I do not.
Do you happen to know the costs it would cost her to transfer money from one account to the other?
There's never any cost for transfers.
To make a transfer in between different banks, are you aware if there's a cost or not?
I do not know.
All right, so just to make sure that it's clear, because my question was kind of backwards there, you wouldn't know if there was a charge for her to transfer money from her bank account ending in 6984 over the Chase account 3836.
Yes.
You would know or you wouldn't know?
I would have known if there was a charge for that. It would have showed up in my analysis.
What I'm asking you is this. You don't see any transfers in between Bank of America and Chase from Ms. Magbanwa's account, do you?
That's correct.
All right, so you wouldn't know if her account, the way it's set up, that she would face a $25, $10, $50 charge for making a transfer in between banks.
I would not.
Also, with respect to the ATMs, you didn't do any sort of analysis to determine whether they were miles away or right next door to each other, right?
No.
So in your analysis, you're looking at around the time of the homicide, which is 2014, to make a determination or to make an analysis, 812, 811, that this is around the time of the homicide, the deposits are being made in different accounts, right?
That's what it shows.
But this is something that she had been doing throughout all the years of records that you have, right?
She often made cash deposits.
In 2013, that's not a date of interest in this case, right?
It was for me to base my analysis.
Based on the records that you have.
Yes.
You know about this case from your meetings with the government and from the news, right?
I know about this case from the records I've seen.
But you also know about it from the news as well, right?
I watch some of the news, but it's not something I base my information on.
And I wasn't trying to insinuate that. The reason why I ask, and I'm going to tie this into a question, is because you know the relevant dates of the case.
Yes.
In fact, Ms. Magbanwa didn't even know Mr. Adelson in 2013, in the middle part of 2013. Do you know that?
I do not.
I'm sorry, Ms. Norris, when you make an objection, if you speak up where I can hear you and state your legal objection,
Lack of foundation.
sustain.
Do you know when Charles Adelson met Catherine McBanois?
I do not.
Do you know of any significance of anything happening in 2013 with respect to this case?
Could you rephrase that question?
Do you know of anything of significance happening on this case in the year 2013?
I do not.
You would agree with me that Ms. McBanois's deposit behavior is the same in 2013. On 11/29/2013, she makes a deposit at Bank of America and then at Chase for cash amounts.
I see that.
Do you know where that money came from?
I do not.
Do you know whether it came from working at Hollywood Live?
I do not.
And for the jury, the reason why we only have a couple lines of 2013 is because no records were obtained for prior to July of 2013, right?
That's correct.
But they could have been.
If they would have been subpoenaed, yes.
Let's talk about purchases now.
Okay.
Looking at it through clean windows. The year 2014, Ms. McBanois, she has breast surgery, right?
Yes.
No big purchases that you know of? Like cars and stuff like that?
No.
2015? No.
No.
Eventually, she buys a Lexus from Harvey Adelson, right?
There is an Alexis in her name. I never found payment for it.
But again, you don't know the source of the cash.
True.
Could it not have been a situation that she takes her tip wages, 17, and we see it in the 2013 transaction, $1,900 deposited on one day. Could it not have been a situation that she takes her cash tips and uses that to purchase the vehicle?
Yes, except that I didn't see any corresponding deposits into the Adelson's accounts.
Would you agree with me that sometimes people don't deposit cash?
That's true.
We have a title of the vehicle. The title shows that the vehicle was purchased, right?
It shows an amount, a purchase amount.
The evidence that we have in this case, and it's admitted in, the evidence shows that it was paid for, right?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
If you could.
It shows that she paid $1,700 for it.
Now again, you went through all of Catherine McBanois's Bank of America accounts, right?
Yes.
Every transaction, line for line.
Yes.
I'm handing you what's been pre-marked as Defense 13. You know what that is, right?
Yes.
That's some of the transactions on Catherine McBanois's checking account for Bank of America.
Okay.
And you know what that is because you've gone through every line of every one of her bank statements.
Yes.
And that is it's in the same or substantially same condition it was in when you reviewed it, when you looked at all the records.
Yes.
Let's move in what's been pre-marked as Defense 13.
Is there objection?
If I could see the exhibit, the records are voluminous. I don't know which particular page is being referenced. Thank you.
Do you know what exhibit this comes out of, just for the cost?
It does. It is, the state's exhibit number? No, I don't. But it's the Bank of America record.
In the future, it'd be helpful if you're gonna pull a piece out to let us know this is a portion of what's already part of the record, and then everybody be a little clearer on what you're doing.
Absolutely, Your Honor, we'll do it.
Admit Defense Exhibit 13.
And Ms. Hall, your belief is that this Lexus was given as a gift for a murder, right?
I believe she got a gift from the family, yes.
Yet, she's paying for dental work at the Adelson Institute, January 8, 2015.
Dental work.
You agree with me that she's paying for dental work, right?
That's what it would appear to me going into their business account, yes.
Doesn't really seem like something that one would do if they helped out in a murder, right?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Your belief is that they gifted her this vehicle, right?
I could not find a payment for it.
Yet, she's paying them for what they do as part of their business, dental work.
Okay.
Why is that only coming out on cross-examination?
Objection, argumentative, Your
Sustained.
Honor.
Let's-
Now, let's go back to people buying things. In the year 2010, what did Luis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, or Catherine McBanois buy that was a big purchase?
I do not have records for 2010.
2011?
I do not have the records before 2013.
You would agree with me, as human beings, we acquire things in the course of our lives.
Yes,
We make big purchases.
some people do.
Wouldn't it be looking at Ms. McBanois and the other defendants through dirty windows to assume that any purchase that was made was therefore nefarious and tied to a crime?
Objection to argumentative.
Sustained.
You have no way to say that any of these purchases are tied to a crime, do you?
I do not.
Now, turning back over to the breast surgery, you have no way to say that that money came from any Adelson, do you?
I do not.
Nor do you have the ability to be able to say that it came from her cash tips at one of the nightclubs that she was working at for nearly 2 years.
I do not.
Government's 114. Do you know the dates of the relationship in between Catherine McBanois and Charles Adelson?
I don't know any specific dates of the relationship.
But you do know, you said relationship, you do know that they were dating at some point.
Yes,
Would you agree with me that it's consistent with a relationship that one buys the other things,
yes,
takes them on vacations,
yes,
maybe to Key West?
possibly.
That is not abnormal behavior.
No.
Government's 48, I'm sorry, that's 118. We talked about 2013, let's talk about 2016 now. We know why we have no entries from here on. When did the large cash deposits stop?
From large cash deposits, looks like on that May or April. I can't see. I could look at my chart.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, that in May, there's a $2,000 deposit and it drops down to $221?
Yes,
When was Sigfredo Garcia arrested?
in May.
So, how can this not be consistent with Sigfredo Garcia giving money to the mother of his 2 children over the course of time via cash payment, and then it drops off at exactly the time that he's arrested?
Her payments from the Adelsons stopped at the same time too.
You agreed with me to look at this through clean windows, though, right?
I'm giving you the information I know.
For this jury, there's no way to say one over the other, though, right?
I know when the checks from the Adelsons stopped.
We're talking about cash here, though.
Correct.
Okay, so there's no way for you to say that that cash is coming from an Adelson versus Sigfredo Garcia versus a nightclub, right?
Correct.
And there's no higher probability of one over the other. You
No,
can't,
I,
let me know if you need me to help you.
okay.
You
need to
can't say,
rephrase it.
yeah, you can't,
Stop, you gotta answer the question.
oh, Your Honor, she asked me to rephrase it.
Is that what you said?
Yes, please rephrase.
Sorry, Your Honor. There's no way for you to say, well, it's more likely that it came from an Adelson than it came from a nightclub or Sigfredo Garcia, right?
Right.
And to be fair, there's no way for you to say that it's more likely it came from a nightclub or Sigfredo Garcia than an Adelson, right?
Correct.
Now, the government asked you about text messages of Charles Adelson, right?
Yes.
They gave you a CD, right?
Yes.
And on that CD, it had a program called the Celebrate Reader.
Actually, I reviewed them prior to that, before they were on the Celebrex.
All right, but you were able to look at many, many different transactions with a bunch of different information and a lot of the text messages, right?
Yes.
And you looked at it with the same level of detail as you looked at her financial records.
The original format was very difficult to read.
But you were still able to find out the body of the message, right?
Yes.
You were asked about text messages in and around September with respect to Ms. Magbanwa's employment.
I reviewed all of the messages, actually.
All right. 1 second, Jerome. Ms. Hall, just one brief moment.
Sure.
My question I'm going to have for you in a minute is going to be about this text message that you talked about. Now, again, this is September 2014. This is right around the time period that checks from the Adelson Institute began, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Hall, I'm handing you what's been pre-marked as defense 15 and 16.
Okay.
Can you take a look at those? You know what those are, right?
I've actually never seen this format, but it looks like the text messages from Charlie Adelson's iCloud.
Now you know that because the body of the text messages is in there and you've reviewed all the text messages, right?
I've reviewed many of them, yes.
And those fairly and accurately depict the messages in between Catherine Magbanwa and Charles Adelson, right?
This only says to and from. It's an index, not any messages.
If you could take a look at the bottom right-hand corner where it says body,
Okay. All right.
and if you would take a look now, what's been pre-marked as defense 16. You also know what that is, right?
Like I said, this is not the format I originally was looking at.
The information, though, is the same as what you reviewed, right?
The information should have been the same as I reviewed, yes.
And the dates correspond to the dates of the other text message that the government entered in, right?
Yes.
Move in what's been pre-marked as defense 15 and 16.
Objection.
Your Honor, can you just sidebar? Thank you.
Let the jury step out. We're going to take a break for a minute, and during the break, Mr. DeCasa wants you to give to the state any of the text messages that you intend to introduce. There is a difference between the state putting in what your client says and you putting in what your client says. So you need to give them what you intend to offer, and then we'll have discussion about them. We'll take 10 minutes.